Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello.
Hello.
Don't you love the days where we record an extra
We have to do 3 in a row. It's like, I got nothing to talk about.
We're perky. I have one thing. I have something. I read Grady Hendrix's new book.
What's that?
How to Sell a Haunted House.
Oh, I haven't read it.
It was good. I read it in 2 days. It was scary. I'm just going to say this. Dolls and puppets.
I've never been afraid of dolls or puppets, but I don't like mannequins.
Well, a lot of people, I'm not particularly afraid of dolls or puppets or clowns. But I can understand, I've seen the pictures. I'm like, okay, I get it. They're creepy. I just thought it was really well done. I liked it even better than a Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And I really like that one.
I've been reading Into the Sublime. I don't remember the author's name. I was wondering, it's set in Colorado, actually. They even mentioned Colorado Springs. No, that's a rarity. It's always Denver.
What's it about?
Denver is always way closer to the mountains than it actually is, which cracks me up. In movies, we watch Black Phone. Mountains are like right there over Denver.
Yes.
And I'm like,
looming over Denver.
They're actually pretty far away from Denver. Yes, you can see them. There's no looming. But I think she's Canadian, actually. But I was fascinated because I was like, was this intentional or not? Okay, so for people who don't know, Colorado Springs is a hotbed of Christianity. More so, a hotbed of evangelical Christianity, and that does make a difference. And
we're the we're the home of Focus on the Family.
Oh, yes. And anyway, the people are from Denver in this story. I think it's YA, but it is YA. Not I think it is, but they're from Denver. But her parents have been having marital problems, and so they run away to a religious retreat in Colorado Springs. And I was like, did she just happen to make it Colorado Springs because she'd heard of it, or are we that famous for being hateful religious psychotics down here? We might be. I don't know. So now that's been on my mind, like, did a Canadian know how bad Colorado Springs is? Or was it completely just I've heard of this Colorado Springs place and it's a fairly big city, so maybe they would go away to a religious retreat.
What's up or down the highway?
Yeah.
What could they reach
So I
easily?
don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that there's an unreliable narrator in this one, so it's pretty interesting because it's a bunch of girls. The Sublime is this area in a cave system where there's supposedly a witch was leading children to it, but then they don't know, do you actually get killed there, or you're supposed to face your fears there, and then maybe you can get the one thing you want most or something. So it's this whole thing. So these teen girls decide to go into a cave system that they know nothing about, and they're following some written directions. And of course, shit goes very wrong. And
I'm just
each of
shaking
them
my
has
head.
their troubles, but you have these little scenes with this cop who's talking to this one girl. The others have been rushed to the hospital for injuries, and it's just her. And she's saying what happened. And they're getting little snippets back from the hospital of, no, she stabbed this girl. And then she goes and she's telling, oh, no, this is what happened. It was actually this other girl that stabbed her. But then I ran over and grabbed the knife. And when she looked, I was holding the knife, twisting this. So until the end, I'm not going to know if this is an unreliable narrator, or if these are actually the explanations. It's twisted in just the right way. It's actually really good. So it's fun. But yes, it has me questioning, like, man.
I picked up a book by Kate Atkinson. Mm-hmm. I cannot remember the name of it. It's one of her older books. It's like Weird Behavior or something like that. And it's this young woman who's in college in England. And it's just, when I picked it up and I start reading it, I was like, what the actual fuck is going on here? Because there are actually 3 stories going on. They all eventually come together. But then because when I picked it up, I'm like, Kate Atkinson. I like Kate Atkinson because I read Life After Life. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but all of a sudden I'm realizing after I finished this book, and I loved it, and it got very, very funny. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I thought it was hilarious. Some of the academic stereotypes and the student stereotypes and the stoner student who never goes to school. And I finally looked up Kate Atkinson, and I'm like, oh, she's actually written a shit ton. And so, yay, I have a whole lot to read now.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I just didn't, I think she has a mystery series. And yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
All right.
I was like figuring out, oh yeah, somebody who I liked has written a shit ton. Delightful.
That's always nice. They're like, I have all these books to read. Although for me, it's usually crap. I do not know when I will get to these. But I might look up something else by this author. I don't know if it's their first or not. So, no idea.
It was when I was visiting Florida, my sister-in-law asked me if I had read any more by, I can't remember his name. He's Scottish and he writes detective novels, police procedurals. They're really good because there's a lot of character development in the secondary characters. And it's very, to me anyway, it's very believable character development. They're not just, puppets. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I loved what I read. I definitely would read him again. I said, it hasn't entered my orbit and there are so many books to read. I just haven't gotten back to it yet.
I add it. I like when I go touristing somewhere, I have to find a bookstore. Mm-hmm. Although I have not done that in Vegas. There's got to be a bookstore. I think we found one on the map thing, but
yeah.
It was far.
Yes.
I have to say though, Uber in Vegas, so much cheaper than Uber in Savannah.
Oh.
Like Savannah appears to be permanently on surge pricing or something. I don't know. But I think we were there during their spring break, which was part of it. But, it was so much. It hurt every time.
Yeah.
We took from and to the airport and to and from Tybee Island.
Wow.
That's it. Everything else was walking in a bus.
No wonder you hurt when you got.
Yes. But anyway, so I thought I added it to my list of wherever we move, Jeffrey has to be coastal. Has to have more sunny days than overcast. Has to have very few cold days, which, settles us southern right there. And has to have a little bookshop. A little privately owned bookshop. Not a Barnes & Noble, a little privately owned bookshop. Now, career-wise, I should want it to be near a Barnes & Noble. I want a little bookshop. But I went to one and I got a couple new books and I haven't read them, but they're uplit next after I read my autistic fight song, which is a memoir by someone who was diagnosed autistic in their 20s.
Nice.
And then I'll pass it to my daughter. But I know this comes as a shock to people, but neurodivergent people's brains are not identical to other neurodivergent people's brains. And her writing is very nonlinear. She's talking about something and then to her, this thing happened adjacent to it, but it doesn't actually get tied in. And so I'm like, twitch. So we'll see how that goes.
I got a book called Murders and Mysteries in the Adirondacks. So it's really funny because some of them are very close, like 15 minutes from where I grew up.
Yeah.
But it's stuff that happened like in the late 1800s. So it's not like the people who did the crimes are still there. But some of them are unsolved. Some of them I probably will talk about in the future. But one of them I was like, the Herman Hotel? The bar? That is one of the unsolved ones. So I'm flipping through my mental Rolodex going, okay, who do I still know up there who might know somebody who's heard about this?
See, I've never lived somewhere long enough in as purposeful a way that I would have somebody who would know somebody who would any of the places I've lived before. Colorado Springs, probably. I've been here since I was 12. But
True.
Before that, there's no... Now, my mom, on the other hand, or dad could have... known somebody. I had this little friend. I bet they would know about this, but we fell out of contact because we moved before there was social media and internet, and so like they lost contact with everybody when we moved. So that whole familial thing is like that whole close knit. I could have somebody who knew somebody thing isn't a thing for me. It's always interesting to hear it from somebody else though, and then I'm a little jelly.
Well, plus
But then I like escaping people, so maybe I wouldn't be.
I have a very large step family.
My mom did too.
There were 9, and I'm lucky in that some of them are very gregarious and outgoing and know fucking everybody. So that's, I'm like, oh, reach out to this. And it could be they're like, they look at me and go, this happened when? Why do you think I would know anything? Why do you think I would know anybody who would know anything?
I mean, I experienced that from going to a funeral service for my grandma and my aunt. They've lived in like rural Oregon for so long that they were taught, oh, you happen to know this thing. And there's somebody else there who's like, oh, yeah, that family. And then like they just throw out a name, a first or last name, and everybody knows who they're talking about. And it's just like me watching ping pong as they talk about. And it just goes deeper and deeper and farther and farther. So again, I find it fascinating. I just don't have it. I do not possess it.
Okay.
Hey, I went on a hearse ghost ride. That was fun. They took old hearse in Savannah.
What?
There's a company, and they take old hearses and they basically shave off the top. So he's driving, but it's open air, and then they have these seats up high. So you're up over it, right? And then you have a canopy over you.
Do you have
But you can
pictures?
drink. I didn't get a picture of the hearse, which made me sad because, like,
Yeah.
there was another one who picked up a group of people who had reserved the entire hearse. And then we were just like with a mix of people, right? And so they came first, and the first thing he said was, oh, let's get a picture of all of you in front of the hearse. And so I thought our guy would do that, and our guy did not do that. And then I just never got the chance to take a picture. So, but I have pictures from the hearse.
It's like, I would love to see that.
That was fun.
looks
That
like
one, there was a great sense of humor in it. And,
always good.
yes, more inappropriate implications. And it's becoming like Vegas and New Orleans. So New Orleans has started sullying other places with this shit, but they have the frozen daiquiri things all over the place, the stores, and you can drink alcohol anywhere. So we were allowed to bring drinks onto this hearse so no open container rule there. But we did not. And I was glad of that because they had all these warnings, like sometimes people vomit. And I'm like, that's because you're letting them drink. But anyway, that was very fun. Just to drive around this open air hearse.
That would be fun. I was looking at catamaran tours in Hawaii, and
I'm doing catamaran in Mexico.
so I started diving into the reviews, and I realized, okay, if you've never been on a boat like that, which I have not, perhaps a 4-hour dinner cruise on choppy water is not your best first trip. And it was like, they have like sunset cruises that you're back in time. You can still go out to dinner. And I'm like, maybe that's the one we want to do, the shorter one. So we learn if we're going to throw up or not.
That's smart. Because I got seasick on a lake.
And the other thing I read was
In a sailboat.
whether or not you think you're going to get seasick, take Dramamine before you go.
But my problem with that, it doesn't make you super tired.
I have no idea. I've never taken Dramamine.
I believe it does.
I know it made, my mom took
Like
it
a Benadryl tired.
to fly, and it made her loopy. So
That's my concern. It's like either or, like which one's worse? Probably vomiting.
probably.
But I really hate being tired.
I will say though, of my mom, she had blood like spring water. I mean, she only ever took aspirin, and
Yeah.
she didn't sully her bloodstream with substances. Okay, so shall I begin?
Yeah.
I've called this one No More Werewolves. I know, I got on a werewolf jag for a while. So instead, I am going to talk about a couple of crimes where the people who committed them thought they were vampires. Because, vampires, werewolves, they go together. Oh, but before I get started, I'm reading the book I got at the Women in Horror book signing that you were part of.
Yeah.
The one, it's short stories, but it's about a vampire. Oh, what is the name of I can't even remember the
Who
name.
was that by?
I can't remember the name of the author.
Was it a single author collection or is it an anthology?
It's a single author collection.
Was it Christina Bergling?
No.
Angela Sylvain?
No.
Julie Campbell?
Maybe.
That's the people who were selling books other than one that was in a anthology.
Who was sitting next to you?
Julie.
That's
With
who
the
it was.
dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started reading that and I'm really enjoying it.
Good.
It's apparently she's got some bigger pieces, but this is
Yeah, she has novel, and she does fantasy, but she does romance. She does a wide array. She's an indie author. She does pretty well.
Yeah, I really am enjoying this because it's not every. Once you've read vampire fiction, there's only so much you can do. But I am really enjoying this. So.
Vampire fiction at this point is really a teenage girl thing.
Yeah,
it has been for a while. I mean, Anne Rice, I read then.
Yep,
that was my big.
Yep,
and a lot of teenage girls. Then of course Twilight came along, but I wasn't a teenage girl. Or if I was, I didn't hear about it then.
No, you weren't, because it was Lucy.
Okay.
Read it. Or, no, she asked me about it, and I said, well, because I didn't know what it was, so I said, well, okay, let me read it first. And I read it.
Like, these vampires aren't dangerous. Here you go.
I'm like, and she did read it, and she was like, eh.
Yeah, Savannah started reading with friends a couple of years ago, and they were like giggling and reading. They were much younger, like 10-ish, and I read them, so I was like, it's fine. You're fine. Until you get to like book 3 or whatever. But when he breaks a bed when they have sex finally. But
oh, see, that's further in the series than I got.
I read the whole thing because I felt like I needed to learn how she sold so well for such a stupid fucking... Sorry. I know some of you love it. Anyway, I just felt like there was something to learn there. And there was. But, and then so I was like, well, I have all those books because I won them on a blog thing. And there was one thing in that set that I wanted. And so then then I ended up with the whole series. And then I had 2 sets. But I'm like, for a person who's not even a fan of these, I now have 2 damn sets of them. So stupid. And so I was like, so I have them if you want to do it. And then we can watch the movies or whatever. They're action movies, right? Like they're entertaining. And she's like, now I think John asked her recently and she was all, no, thank you. So she never ended up actually. She passed that perfect time there.
Well, when Thing One had her tonsils out, she must have been 12, I think, ish, when she had her tonsils out. Her best friend came over and they watched Twilight, the movie. And it was so funny because she was like, "Ugh, it's not like..."
It's like a car accident, but it's a car accident that I was like, I'm going to see it through. I'm going to watch all of these movies and see it. Because at first they were claiming that all the native characters were played by native actors. And so I wanted to support that. But then Taylor Lautner wasn't native and he was the primary engine. So yeah, but when they claimed that they had gotten all. And they did get native actors in there, though, so I'm still willing to support that. Yes. But for the headliner, they sure couldn't. Anyway.
Could have. Anyway, okay. So, yes, I'm going to talk about a couple of different cases where the killers thought they were vampires. This story opens with Daniel and Manuela Ruda in West Germany. They identified as both Satanists and vampires. So, double threat there.
That's not... Okay.
They got married. Yes, and those two don't go hand in hand. They married on the 6th day of the 6th month. That was very hard to say. To symbolize the number of the beast. Manuela liked to sleep in a coffin and went so far as to have, I don't believe it was all, but she had some of her teeth removed and animal fangs implanted.
Oh.
I would like to question the ethics of any dental professional who would agree to such a procedure. Anyway, they began drinking blood from consensual volunteers, often when they were on holiday to England and Scotland for the purpose of meeting other goth Satanist vampires.
Haven't they heard of New Orleans?
Well, they were in Germany, so this was much closer. And they would have these gatherings in cemeteries and abandoned buildings, and they would sleep in cemeteries. And in 2001, Satan wanted more from them. He wanted a sacrifice. So they chose a friend, 33-year-old Frank Hagen, a baker. And they chose him because he was funny and well-liked, and they thought he would make a good court jester for Satan. Just of all the stupid fucking reasons to choose to kill someone. They invited him to their home using the pretext of a party. And I read it 2 different ways. That he was either going to come join them and they were going to take him to a party, or they were going to have a party. Not clear. but it was a pretext. So after he arrived, Daniel hit him in the head with a hammer, then ritualistically stabbed him 66 times. After he was dead...
Not 666?
No. That would be...
That's a lot. You'd be like mush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After he was dead, they carved a pentagram into his stomach and drank his blood. Then they had sex in Manuela's coffin and prayed to Satan, who
Sounds
did not
like a great
answer.
evening
Yeah,
for them.
I guess. Manuela was reportedly furious that she wasn't completely turned into a real vampire after they performed the sacrifice. Another article said they were furious because they thought they would wake up in hell with him and they could present him as their offering. Mm-hmm. Then why didn't you just kill yourself?
Right, then you could be there with them. Silly.
So when police came knocking on the door, they found the decomposing body of Hagen on the floor near the coffin. So yeah, ugh. I'm sorry, that just is... Ugh. So the Rudas treated their murder trial with about as much respect as you would imagine. They were loud, they were boisterous, they were showing off, they were throwing satanic hand signs. I don't exactly know what those are. They threatened witnesses. Daniel had his teeth filed into points. They claimed they weren't guilty because they were acting under Satan's orders. And the comparison used was this. If someone was struck and killed by a car, would you arrest the car? Yeah.
Yes, I would.
The jury was not having any of it. So, Daniel, who was 26 years old, was sentenced to 15 years in a psychiatric hospital, and Manuela, who was 23 years old, was sentenced to 13 years in a psychiatric hospital. Manuela was released from the psych hospital after serving her time, but does remain under psychiatric care. She has a new identity. They seem to be leaving her alone. No one has been out trying to track her down. Part of the deal was they could have no contact, and she has had no contact with him, doesn't want any contact with him. In 2017, a prison informer reported to authorities that Daniel was trying to hire a contract killer to infiltrate the kitchen at the facility where his wife was because his wife worked in the kitchen and he wanted her killed.
Jesus.
The theory was that he was angry that she got a shorter sentence. However, they were not able to prove that. I mean, they investigated, they weren't able to prove it, so he was cleared of those charges.
Yikes.
In 2017, he petitioned for his release, saying he wanted to live a normal life and raise a family. Because if that's not dad material, what is?
Nobody. Because he was the one who did the stabbing, though, right?
It seems like, yes. Okay. He definitely hit him with the hammer.
That's why he got the bigger sentence.
While he was in prison, he was a librarian. He didn't drink. He didn't do drugs. The parents of the victim fought it, but eventually he was released. So they're both out now, making their way in the world. There was talk of banning him from traveling to the United Kingdom, but I was unable to track down whether that happened or not. Because Great Britain was like, fuck no, don't come back. Go,
No.
Go be nasty somewhere else.
Stay in Germany or wherever you were from.
The next story, I'm just going to warn you, there's some really oogie parts. Do it. So I'm just giving a warning to people. So now we're going to Sacramento, California in May of 1950 when Richard Trenton Chase was born. And by age 5, he exhibited all 3 facets of the McDonald triad. Mm-hmm. And I know that you know what that is, but I'm going to give a brief.
You want to know how I feel about it.
Yes, and I'm going to mention that. I am going to mention that. So for everybody who just said the whoey and the whaty, the McDonald triad is a set of 3 factors, and the possession of 2 of them is or was considered predictive of or associated with violent tendencies, especially in the context of serial offenders. So the psychiatrist J.M. McDonald proposed this theory in 1963. Researchers said the presence of these patterns in children predicted later predatory behavior. So the 3 behaviors are cruelty to animals, obsession with fire and setting fires, and persistent bedwetting past the age of 5. But I do want to point out, later researchers threw the validity of the theory into question. They say now the three facets are more likely to be indicative of parental brutality, neglect, or abuse.
Yeah, but interestingly, I've heard very commonly they'll not only still cite the McDonald triad, but now they're finding that a lot of these serial offenders had head injuries when they were younger too.
Really?
Yes.
I had not heard that.
So I don't know much about that yet, but I've started seeing that. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But so anyway, he began using drugs heavily as a teenager. And I'm just going to let you all know. If you want to find out more about this person, you can research him because there are details. I am shortening it for the sake of the podcast. I know you love to hear me talking, but there are limits to everything. Also, there are details I'm gonna either combine stuff together, or there is some stuff I'm going to skip because you don't need to know every tiny thing. But he began using drugs heavily as a teenager and exhibited, this was the weird thing, early signs of hypochondria. That really comes back to haunt him later. He believed his heart sometimes stopped beating, and at one point claimed someone had stolen his pulmonary artery. He would hold oranges against his head so that his brain could absorb vitamin C. Like, that's a new one. He thought his cranial bones had separated and were moving around, and he shaved his head so that he could watch it. He became convinced his mother was trying to poison him, so he moved out. This set of roommates complained about his constant use of alcohol, pot, and LSD. But the real issue they had with him was that he walked around naked all the time, even when they had company.
Yeah.
They tried to get him to move, and when they couldn't get him to move, they moved. About this time is when small animal abuse began. He killed the animals and ate them raw. Sometimes he mixed their organs with Coke in a blender, believing that this concoction would keep his heart from shrinking. He was in a psych ward in 1973. Briefly. In 1976, he was involuntarily committed because this is where the hypochondria comes back in. He injected rabbit blood into his veins to keep his heart from shrinking. So, while he was hospitalized, while he was in a secure facility, although this was in 1976, it wasn't then what it is now. He caught two birds through the window, killed them and drank their blood. He stole syringes so that he could take blood from the therapy dogs to drink. Mm-hmm. Therapy dogs. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, was treated with psychotropic drugs, and eventually deemed now the threat and released into his mother's custody. She eventually weaned him off the drugs and got him into an apartment of his own. This is where I couldn't find... I'm like, that doesn't seem right when someone is diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia to take them off their drugs. Then again, I don't know what the standard was then, but I couldn't find anything that said mom got a wild hair and just decided to do this, or if this was something she was advised to do, wean him off the drugs, which could be. A side trip, a little side story. In mid-1977, he was stopped and arrested on a reservation near Pyramid Lake, Nevada. He was smeared with blood and had a bucket of blood in his truck. But it was cow blood, so they released him. Because that's fucking normal.
All right. Okay.
I'm just going to drive around with a bucket of cow blood. December 29th of 77, he killed what may have been his first victim, Ambrose Griffin, in a drive-by shooting. 2 weeks later, he tried to enter a woman's home, but left because the doors were locked. He later told authorities...
Yes, he invited him.
Yeah, exactly. That's it exactly. If your door is unlocked, you are inviting him in. I will tell you something. Do you ever read Reader's Digest?
Yeah.
Okay. So we always had a subscription to it when I was growing up. And at some point, there was some story of some horrible criminal, and he walked up to doors in neighborhoods, and if the door was locked, he walked away.
Yeah.
I have never left accidentally maybe. I always lock my doors at night. after reading that. And that's why I think about that. Because if somebody comes up and jiggles the door, they're going to say it's locked and keep going.
Ah.
That's my hope.
Too much work.
Exactly. And the dog would be barking. He was chased from another home when the couple came home. This is just wrong. And found him defecating on their infant's bed and clothing. Yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with being a vampire, by the way. The next part is the graphic part. On January 23rd, 1978, he entered Teresa Wallen's home and shot her 3 times. He had sex with her corpse while stabbing her, removed several organs, and drank her blood. And I'm just going to say he desecrated her body.
Yeah.
Thank you. On January 23rd. On January 27th, he entered Evelyn Miroth's home. He shot the first person he encountered, who was Danny Meredith. He shot and killed Evelyn, her 6-year-old son, and her 22-month-old nephew. With Evelyn, there was necrophilia as well as cannibalism. When a neighbor knocked on the door, he grabbed her nephew's body and fled in Meredith's car. There were prints and tracks all over the house. It didn't take police too long to track him down. When they found him at home, there was blood everywhere. I mean, it was everywhere. It was on the walls. It was on him. It was on the cupboards. And there were body parts in the fridge.
Convenient.
Yep. His ending is really anticlimactic. He was charged with 6 counts of murder in 1979. His defense went for second-degree murder and played heavily on his history of mental illness. He was found guilty of 6 charges of first-degree murder, and the insanity plea was rejected. He was sent to prison, sentenced to die by the gas chamber. Other inmates were reportedly afraid of him because they'd heard his history and frequently suggested to him that he commit suicide. He did grant a series of interviews to one reporter claiming he was afraid of Nazis, UFOs, and Nazi UFOs.
Oh, Nazi UFOs are the worst.
They really are. In December of 1980, he was found dead in his cell of suicide. He had hoarded his meds until he had enough.
There you go.
There are all kinds of people out there who think they're vampires, and it's just, wow. It was so that one was brutal and awful, but it was the first one where they left the dead body on the floor next to where they slept, or at least where she slept, and had sex in the coffin with the dead body right there.
I just feel that coffins can't be nearly as comfortable as these people make them out to be. All the people who have slept in a coffin, it's made for dead people, so they're not trying to make it comfortable.
It's not padded. I mean, there's a lining. Don't get me wrong, there's a lining, but I don't...
So you'd have to have a custom coffin.
Or do you think the more expensive ones have padding?
Maybe they do.
Perhaps Thing 2 will someday listen to this and let us know. She worked in a funeral home for a while, so I was like, why would they pad them? Why do we put people in ornate boxes and stick them in the ground?
Because people are weird about their dead.
That's true.
I don't understand why they put people in boxes and stick them in the ground. So, see, to me, that's weird.
It is, when you think about it.
Yeah.
It is not just boxes. It's fancy boxes.
Fancy boxes that they spend a lot of money for.
Yes.
I don't get it.
Fancy fixtures.
And why do we need to fill the ground with all these boxes? Death is a natural thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get any of that.
Every time there's a new thing that comes out that can be done with dead bodies, my family gets a family group message. Okay, I want to be composted. It's legal in Colorado now. It is, and I do.
I want to be space dust. I want you to put me in a giant can and shoot me into space. No.
Why
would I do that to space?
That's very... Oh.
Burn me.
What was the guy who had his remains shot into space? By Johnny Depp.
Oh.
Shit. It was the writer, the gonzo journalist.
Oh, yeah. The Fear and Loathing guy?
Yes.
Shit.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That guy. He had his remains shot into space by Johnny Depp. I thought that was what you were referencing.
No, I was just making shit up and pulling it out of my ass.
Okay, so you realize...
That's just how good I am.
You realize halfway through this, I'm going to think of his name and scream it out.
Yeah. Or I will. All right, so I'm doing a cryptid or folklore or whatever you want to call it. Really, it's honestly never referred to as a cryptid, but I think it qualifies. Anyway, the Jersey Devil, also known and actually originally known as the Leeds Devil, is a folk legend in the southeastern part of New Jersey made up of the Pine Barrens. After Joe Lansdale, I see barrens a whole different way. Mm-hmm. The area thought to be the origin is described as being remote, 1,700 square miles, an aquifer full of white cedar stands with red streams dyed with tannin. Most of the roads were built over old Indian trails or stagecoach roads, and there are still unpaved sandy roads throughout the area. The Jersey Devil, so it's rural.
Hunter S. Thompson.
Yes, it is Hunter S. Thompson.
Sorry.
The Jersey Devil not only has a birthplace, but a birth story. In fact, multiple.
Origin story? I love an origin story.
Yeah, here's a few for you. There was one I was like, not interested. In 1735, a Quaker woman named Mother Leeds, who was thought to be a sorceress with 12 children birthed the misshapen child during a heavy thunderstorm. Though other tales said the child was born normal, but cursed by Mother Leeds because she didn't want yet another mouth to feed, as her alcoholic husband already couldn't provide for the family as it was. In some of the stories, she yells something like, "Make it be the devil!" or something like that. And then, and it transforms before their very eyes into the monster it would become. Either way, the baby was described as having the head of a horse. Some people say the head of a dog and the snout of a horse. And I'm like, what? How does that work? Anyway, a long or elongated body, like the worm-like or wyvern dragons. Mm-hmm. Cloven feet, a forked tail, and bat wings. And don't forget the dangerous talons. You cannot forget the dangerous talons. In some variations, he also has horns. And sometimes he's shaped more like a kangaroo, or at least in his movements. And I'm like, damn.
That would have been a bitch to birth.
Yes, it would. He stands somewhere between 3 and 6 feet. So some say he's 3 to 4 feet tall, and some say he's 6 feet. Plus, he screams in a blood-curdling fashion. I thought it was funny. Every single story about him, those words, blood-curdling scream.
So you would love to see a movie about him.
There probably are some. I don't know.
Probably.
Interestingly, historians have pointed to an actual family as possibly being the source of the Jersey Devil. Japhet, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Japhet, and Deborah Leeds lived in Leeds Point in Atlantic City. In 1736, Japhet Leeds wrote a will bequeathing his belongings to his wife and 12 children. So there was a person with the name in the area with 12 children. Their home actually has been preserved, so you can tour it. But so I imagine you make money with ghost tours and stuff like that. I imagine, though I didn't look it up, they've probably made that association. But wait, there are other possible birth stories beyond Mother Leeds. This one starts in 1778 when an American girl fell for a British soldier. There was a great battle that happened there between them as well. And after that battle, her fellow villagers cursed her for getting involved with the enemy. And she went on to stay with him, and their firstborn child was deformed in the same way. I'm not going to describe it again because it's the same.
Ow.
Here's another. A young woman was traveling when she came upon Gypsy. This is like Beauty and the Beast or something. The starving Gypsy begged for food. Do we have gypsies here in New Jersey? Did we? Did we have any Romani?
That early? I
don't think so. I don't. Anyway, but we're going with it, and we're leaving. They use the word gypsy. It's complicated. It's like Inuit versus Eskimo versus all that, because there is in fact a group of people that will call themselves the gypsies, so they're not offended by it, and they don't consider they're not Romani. So then calling all of them Romani is also incorrect, and it's the same thing. Don't use Eskimo, but there are people there is a group at least that are the Eskimo people, right? And then the Inuit, not everybody's Inuit. So I use Alaskan Native now, and I don't know what the fuck to use for Gypsy or Romani. Now, if they say Romani, then I'm going to say Romani. And in general, I just don't know. Anyway, This was a government site that was using gypsies, so I just went with it.
Okay.
Because also the term gypsy has been used for other things. Like in Europe, that's a bad thing. And so then, of course, we here in America went through our whole, this is inappropriate and you can't use it because it's not accurate. But we had gypsies, but they were from Mexico. In Oregon, for example, growing up, they called them gypsies in California and Oregon because they were people who would travel from Mexico and come up the rivers.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I just don't know. So in general, I do try and avoid gypsy for the record, but I'm repeating a story. And they didn't say Romani, and it's fucking New Jersey. So I don't even know. Anyway, the frightened girl refused to hand any food over. I'm like, did she just have some? Or did she even have any? Like, maybe she didn't have any. Fuck's sakes.
Maybe she didn't pack a snack.
And of course, then the gypsy or whoever cursed.
Of course.
Cursed the girl. And then she went on, she had a child, and it was blah, 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 blah. We have a theme here. In most of these stories, the newborn child somehow has the strength and ability to get up and flee the home out of a window or the chimney, as in the case of Mother Leeds. It actually supposedly killed its mother in some of the tales and fled. But in the ones where it kills its mother, she had tried to keep it in the house to keep others safe, and then it gets big enough and it escapes. But in some of these, it's like the baby was a monster immediately and leapt out a window. And then I heard different variations on read Mother Leeds, where it killed everybody in the room except for its parents and escaped. Like newborn. So, great.
All right.
And after this, there were always many tales. Locals spoke of hearing wailing in the bogs and swamps and the sounds of it slaughtering its prey. Similar to the Mothman, the Jersey Devil's appearance.
I don't know why that just cracked me up.
Is thought by some to foreshadow an impending disaster and even sometimes war. People say the Jersey Devil brings drought and dries up their cattle, even causing the deaths of cattle. Now, that's really should say people said. And of course, in true folklore fashion, when crops die off, it's got to be because of good old JD. And honestly, I'm going to call him JD from here on out most of the time because it's way easier than saying Jersey Devil or Leeds Devil over and over and over again. Most people do know it as the Jersey Devil, but again, it started as the Leeds Devil. And I'm going to have I was going to leave it out, and I was like, nope. I looked into it more, and I was like, I must condense this and report on it, and you'll see why.
Okay.
But it also kind of goes into why it was called the Leeds Devil. The more nefarious stories state that JD ate children, pets, and farm animals. And actually now when you look at him, he's a mascot. People he's been used for good and stuff like that. So now he's just fun, of course, like all these things are. But back in the day when you didn't have internet and a protection and you were isolated and all of that, he was not going to be entertaining. Some say he appears every 7 years. Many of those sightings, JD through the years, were highly respected individuals. This first one, I don't know how respected he was. I didn't even know he existed. But Napoleon's brother, Joseph Bonaparte, claimed that he saw JD on a hunting trip near Bordentown. Yep, in the woods.
Napoleon had a brother?
Right? I didn't look it up, so don't.
Okay,
wouldn't that be funny if he didn't exist? But it was on a government. It was on the Atlantic County website. Commodore Stephen Decatur, described as an American naval hero on the Atlantic County website, saw JD while he was at a cannon firing range to test the cannonballs he was having made. They had a firing range for cannons. So the creature was flying over the range and he fired a cannon at it and insisted that he hit it, but it didn't even slow it down. It just flew away. Yeah, you hit it. Okay.
Do you get much loft with a cannonball?
Right? Like how high does it go? The Jersey Devil also gets around. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Not only does he cavort with mermaids, as witnessed in 1870, but, yes, there was a mermaid he was said to be cavorting with. Ooh, the cavorting.
I love a good cavort.
Who doesn't? But he also made friends with a ghost left behind by the notorious Captain Kidd. Kidd had landed in Barnegat Bay with plans to bury treasure there, and he beheaded one of his crew members so his ghost could guard the treasure. And I was like, okay, personally, you kill me to protect your treasure, and bitch, I'm going to be going out and pulling people in and being like, right here! I'm going to jingle my chains over it and be like, dig here! Write little signs in the sand. dig here for treasure with little arrows pointing at it. Fuck you, I'm not protecting your treasure after you killed me.
Exactly.
I think it's funny, like, how many old stories they're like, and then they killed them to protect them. Or, like, in the pyramids or whatever. They were, or in, feudal Japan or some shit. I don't remember when it was. Like, all of your servants had to be buried alive with you, right?
Ancient Egypt.
Oh, I said that one, but I think that I was trying to remember if it was just clay soldiers in Japan that were buried, so it wasn't real people.
Oh.
I don't know if there were ever real people in that one. But anyway.
I do not know.
I'm like, they're not going to protect your shit. You killed them. In some instances, you buried them alive. Fuck your treasure. And fuck you. Yes. I don't see how they think that works. Anyway, this ghost pirate enjoyed long walks on the beach with JD. And they were sometimes sighted in the marshlands, just hanging out, just chilling in the bogs. An entire posse in Clayton claimed they chased JD into the woods, but then he evaded them. My favorite, even more than the ghost pirate, and I love a pirate, is the claim that JD had breakfast with a Republican, Judge French. However, the Atlantic County webpage made clear that JD did not have any specific political leanings, and this was a fluke, and it was ham and eggs. I was just like, oh, I'm glad that JD didn't have any political leanings, and I'm glad you pointed that out.
And I'm happy as hell to know that he had ham and eggs.
Yes, indeed. In 1840, a series of animal slayings were blamed on JD. And just a year or two later, there were further animal slayings. Once again, they were like, Jersey Devil. And I'm like, well, that's a way to get away with a crime. Do it where the Jersey Devil lives. Though the Jersey Devil was born and mostly hung out in that very specific region previously mentioned, he has been sighted on all borders and was sighted sailing across the Delaware River. I was like, was he in a rowboat? Like, tell me more. There are also a significant number of sightings in Delaware and Pennsylvania. He's been sighted in Maryland, yada, yada. Those traveling the Garden State Parkway and the Atlantic City Expressway still see JD from time to time. Are they drunk?
I am skeptical.
Look at me being skeptical.
And if I had known about this before I went to Florida, I could have asked the New Jersey relatives.
That's right. Still could. And you could report back.
I could. Will I?
Who knows?
Maybe.
In January 1909, he showed up in a bunch of police reports in the newspapers. There was this total flurry of activity, fear, just rampant through the area. Odd cloven footsteps were reported in the snow. Some people in a trolley said that the Jersey Devil had threatened them. There was a garden party it interrupted. And he...
Not a garden party!
No, the shame. And he had left a swath of bodies behind in the Pine Barrens, causing workers who had to go into the barrens to refuse to go to work for a week straight, fearful for their lives, and several area schools shut down during this rash of insanity.
What body? Okay, when you say bodies...
It didn't say.
Because I'm like, well, were they humans?
Yeah, they were humans, supposedly. But can they name anybody? No, like, they sure can.
Or, I'm like, or were there a bunch of dead animals?
Police officers reported having shot at the creature. They saw it. They shot at it. Didn't impact it whatsoever. The shots didn't seem to injure it. A social club was attacked. And the creature showed up in Maryland during this time, too. Groups of vigilantes started hunting it in the Barrens. And I'm just terrified at the thought of being a human in the Barrens at this point. They were armed. They were ready to kill it, but they never found it. I will say they said later that somebody admitted to like using like horse hooves to fake some of the... But anyway. In a panic, scientists were brought in, including some from the Smithsonian Institute and some from Philadelphia. Their theory was that the Jersey Devil was a Jurassic-era prehistoric creature that had possibly survived the death of the dinosaurs by hanging out in nearby limestone caves. At the time, they investigated known dinosaur species and like the flying ones and all that good stuff, but could not connect JD with any known fossil specimens. But like they really tried. Like props to them. Robert D. Carson, the superintendent of the Philadelphia Zoo, offered a $10,000 reward for anyone who captured him and brought him in. The creature would be given its own section at the zoo, so it had to be turned in alive. I found it interesting that the farther north the stories were, the more nefarious the Jersey Devil was. Like, the more dangerous things were happening up north. And that's where he was actually typically associated with like demons or the devil. And some even thought he was part human, part devil. Then again, it was also theorized by Jeff Brunner more recently, who works with the Humane Society in that area, that JD was a sandhill crane, as they stand up to 4 feet tall with an 80-inch wingspan, and they're said to be quite aggressive, especially if cornered. In the Vietnam era, local soldiers considered JD to be a symbol against the war. So that's one of the things where he was a positive thing. Huh. I'm like, so you think he's going to sit in some protests with you or what?
Yeah.
Children growing up in the region have been threatened with the Jersey Devil, of course, because that's how it works with folklore creatures. There are still occasional sightings reported, and in 1939, JD became the official state demon. Officially. He has been named a state demon. I was like, oh, I want a state demon. Colorado, that would be real hard to get done, and now I want to. Oddly, the Jersey Devil may also be connected to Benjamin Franklin. Here's the one I was going to leave out, and I'm like, nah. Also, it ties some things together rather nicely. A rival almanac writer named Daniel Leeds was doing way too well, and Benjamin Franklin didn't appreciate the competition. He started roasting him, but really it would be his son that he mostly went after. He called the Leeds family monsters. Leeds was a Quaker, which is an interesting parallel with Mother Leeds, though his wife only had 9 children, not 12. But when he became fascinated with Christian mysticism and occultism and started putting astrology in his almanac, he was called a blasphemer, and they ostracized him in 1687. On a side note, Leeds was British, but I couldn't find whether his wife was American to tie into that story, because I thought that would be nice.
Wait, what was the year?
In the 1680s. So there was still, he was, I didn't go into it, so there is more to this if people wanted to look it up, but he was considered a monarchist, so he still believed in following the British monarchy.
I was like, wasn't Benjamin Franklin later than that?
The 1680s and early 1710s.
Okay.
When Leeds bucked solidly against the Quakers and they started getting his almanacs and burning them. And he started publishing anti-Quaker tracts. The Quaker community turned around and published a tract calling him evil, stating he was working for the devil. It was entitled Satan's Harbinger Encountered, ... being something by way of answer to Daniel Leeds.
Oh my God.
Boy, that's some uppity shit right there.
That's a burn.
It was after Daniel's son, Titan, took over the almanac in 1716 that Franklin attacked the family. Titan Leeds continued using the astrology in the almanacs, and Franklin incorporated astrology into his almanac, using it to jokingly predict Titan's death. Franklin was a smug motherfucker. When Titan got offended and wrote something publicly against Franklin's actions, Franklin then published something saying Titan was dead, as he'd predicted, and that his ghost was publishing the almanac. Like, what a professional. Titan did end up predeceasing Franklin, though not at the time he claimed he would. And Franklin continued after his death, joking about his ghost. I find that insanely tacky. Continued attacking this man in his almanacs.
Benjamin Franklin was a dick.
He was. But we're brought up, right? Everything we learn about Benjamin Franklin early is he was fantastic. He was an inventor. He was a genius. He did so many awesome things. And then you get to hear about Benjamin Franklin, right? But in this guy, I'm sure he had his problems too. Again, they continued sticking up for the monarchy and wanting Britain to have control.
Mm.
So they were on the wrong side of history, at least. The Leeds family crest had a dragon or wyvern on it. The worm-shaped dragons. And Titan had incorporated this into his almanac, which is part of why it's thought that this contributed to the later creation of the Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
Note that this precedes the birth stories of JD, and that the original name was actually the Leeds Devil, and they were living in that Leeds area, named after the Leeds family. So there you go. It has been extrapolated that the creature haunting the Barrens may have been a result of basically elitism against the rural. The residents were rural, they were highly judged, and the Barrens were looked down upon. The residents are considered outcasts, nicknamed Pineys or Pine Rats, and consisting of course, Native Americans who were forced into the nasty areas where things wouldn't grow, poor farmers, fugitives, escaped slaves, soldiers that had deserted, moonshine runners, all of that good stuff. A horrible eugenics report was done on the Kallikak family. That is a fascinating name, and I love it.
What was it?
Kallikak. That framed all Pineys as criminals and, quote, congenital idiots. You know, eugenics. Ugly, ugly, ugly.
Yes.
So it hit that area, and they basically said all of the Barrens people, all the Pineys were trash and morons and unintelligent, you know, all that.
Genetically inferior.
Exactly.
Oh, fuck.
This, of course, since has been declared as a highly biased report and falsified, but the damage was done at the time. It took until modern times for them to look at it and go, wow, douchebag. There were even highwaymen that roved the Barrens and robbed those passing through, a group of which was made up of loyalist brigands and known as the Pine Robbers. Like, there's so much fun history in this area that I could happily read a book about it. There are a ton of ghost stories there.
Of course.
I wasn't going to name them all, but there's also black dog lore, but the black dog is not a negative entity, which it normally is. It's a positive entity. There's a white stag, and Captain Kidd is also said to haunt it and gallivant about the Barrens. And I'm like, why would he go back to Jersey of all the places he went, you guys?
There's a lot of gallivanting in this story.
So much cavorting and gallivanting,
Yes.
and those are my favorites. A medical sociologist named Robert E. Bartholomew teamed up with author Peter Hassel to theorize that the 1909 sightings were mass hysteria. As often happens, the supposed origins of the Jersey Devil were actually preceded by Lenape lore. That's Native Americans in the area, sometimes known as the Lene Lenape. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Involving a creature similar to a deer that had leathery wings. This creature was called the Masing or the Mysing. There's several different spellings, and it looked like the Shawnee also possibly believes in it, and one other tribe, and was actually known as a protective spirit to local tribes, watching over the forest creatures. Masing is the Lenape mass spirit, and was spoken of in the Pine Barrens area well before white folks came along to take it and create their urban legends. So it sounds like a combo of a few things, that they took this native lore and maybe combined it with the wyvern of that seal from the Leads.
Yeah.
And, you know, stole it like they do everything else. Resources, Atlantic County website. All that's interesting, Pinelands Preservation Alliance, nativelanguages.org, because I looked up the Masing, and Wikipedia. So there's the Jersey Devil. I knew about the Jersey Devil, but I didn't know most of those things. I did not know that he cavorted with mermaids.
And ghosts.
Or that Captain Kidd gallivanted.
No.
In the tent, but it didn't say they partied. Only that the dude who he beheaded partied.
And he
And took long
disturbed
walks on the beach.
a garden party.
Garden party. Oh
And
my
had
God.
breakfast with a Republican.
I love it. There was like a
Had ham and eggs with a Republican.
how many? Yeah, the fact that they said a Republican and then it's like M dash judge whoever. And I was like, okay. And they were like, but he did not have his own. Okay, well, did he sit in the restaurant? But he had tiny arms. They said. So how did he eat? Like, how does the T-Rex eat? Did he just put his little dog horse face down there? Like, what's the actual story? You guys never think through your stories. Right?
Well, the dog horse face, I'm picturing, picture a dog like a Great Dane.
Yeah.
That has that big jutting,
But
but
it's a dog head and a horse snout.
right. So I'm thinking instead of that long dog snout, it has a
Thick horse.
That's the.
I have drawings and engravings. That
I mean, you can't put that on a Chihuahua. It just doesn't work.
Just, I was like, no woman birthed a 4-foot. Stop it.
With
Creature.
horns.
With horns and wings and talons. And a horse face. That's just rude, by the way. Usually when you say somebody has a horse face, it's not polite.
It is not.
But yes, the further north you got, the more it was like, it kills children! And down south, they're like, it killed our crops. So, no, probably the Barrens did that.
Which could in turn kill your children if you didn't have
true.
any crops.
True.
And we got to Harshaw and Ben Franklin.
That's true. Yeah. Because he was really a dick in this situation. Like, there's, again, look it up if you guys want to. Daniel Leeds and Ben Franklin and the Leeds Almanac, I think it was called. And Titan Leeds, though, is the one he really went after. But the Leeds in general were not all that well liked because of their monarchist or imperialist or whatever it was called leanings. Mm-hmm. So, and they were very vocal and outspoken in favor of.
When Ben Franklin became a statesman, and went to France to cavort naked.
Yeah.
He would write letters home to his wife, who was taking care of their business and raising their children, and chastise her for not making enough money to send him to cavort with
Gross.
women of purchasable favors.
That's right. He was a great guy. Great guy, though. Key, kite.
He invented
lightning.
electricity. My God. Just using a kite and a key.
Wait, wasn't that Edison? Wait, who invented electricity?
Tesla.
It's not Tesla. That's always the wrong answer.
Well.
Yeah, I know. So, all right. Thank you for listening.
Yes, we'll be back next week. Who knows what we'll have next week?
We don't know. So.
We do not, at this point, we do not know.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.